Let's talk about a guy who reigned for mind-boggling 66 years, who oversaw a golden age of wealth and power, and who was known to later Egyptians as simply the Great Ancestor. We're talking about Ramesses II.
But you might know him by a different name, a Greek one, Ozymandias. Yeah, that Ozymandias, from the famous poem by Shelley. It's all about how even the mightiest kings and the grandest empires eventually just crumble into dust. A pretty powerful idea to keep in mind. And that really gets to the heart of what we're digging into today. Was Ramesses truly the great leader history remembers him as? Or was he antiquity's greatest spin doctor, a pharaoh who built his legacy not just with stone, but with a whole lot of really good stories? Let's take a look at the evidence. So first up, let's look at the legend. This is the version of the story Ramesses wanted us to see, the one he literally carved into stone to last for eternity. And, it was nothing short of epic. The foundation of this whole legend? It's just time. Ramesses ruled for 66 years. I mean, think about that. That is an insanely long time. He actually outlived most of his own children, including his first 12 sons. The guy who finally took over was his 13th son, and he was already in his 60s. This incredible lifespan gave Ramesses a unique superpower, the time to literally reshape Egypt in his own image and tell his own story. And the stats from his reign are just wild. He fathered over 100 children. He celebrated 14 Sed festivals. These were these huge rituals to renew a pharaoh's divine power, and most pharaohs were lucky to even get to one. The point is, by every measure, he operated on a scale that was almost mythological.
Okay, and this brings us to the most famous event of his reign, and it's a huge piece of his legend, the Battle of Kadesh. And this is where the line between history and propaganda gets really, really blurry and fascinating.
So, check out this contrast. In Ramesses' version, which he had carved on temple walls all over Egypt, he's basically a superhero. He's a lone hero claiming, "I charged their ranks. I slew them without sparing any." But the reality? It was a bloody stalemate. Ramesses got totally fooled by Hittite spies, walked his army straight into an ambush, and his pride nearly cost him the whole war. And here's the crazy part. If we didn't have the records from his enemies, the Hittites, his version is probably the only one we'd ever have. But here's the twist. The real legacy of this so-called glorious victory is what happened next. 16 years later, after realizing neither side could win, Ramesses and the Hittite king signed the Treaty of Kadesh, which is the earliest peace treaty in history we have a record of. This kicked off decades of peace and prosperity. So it was a genuine diplomatic win that was born from a massive military PR campaign. So if Kadesh was the story he told, his building projects were the giant, unmissable stage he told it on. Ramesses wasn't just a warrior. He was one of the most prolific builders in all of human history. And he didn't just build. He built on a scale that's hard to even wrap your head around. He founded a whole new capital city, he built temples the size of towns, and he just covered the landscape with enormous statues of himself. The goal here was pretty simple: create a legacy so huge it could never be ignored, never be forgotten, and never be erased. I mean, his new capital, Ramesses, was a true metropolis with over 300,000 people. He built the massive Ramesseum to be his mortuary temple, but his most breathtaking project was way down south in Nubia, the twin temples of Abu Simbel, which were literally carved out of a mountainside. And what he did there perfectly sums up his whole ambition. Get this, inside Abu Simbel, he does something completely unprecedented. Normally, pharaohs were seen as the connection between the gods and regular people. But in here, Ramesses is shown worshiping a deified version of himself. He made himself a god and then worshipped that god, all while he was still alive. Talk about self-confidence. So, how did he do it? How did he manage to craft a legacy so powerful that it's lasted for over 3,000 years? Well, when you look closely, you realize it wasn't just luck. It was a strategy, a very clever one. You can almost break it down into a 4-step guide to immortality. 1. Exaggerate your victories. Turn a messy battle like Kadesh into a heroic personal triumph. 2. Build big, so big that your monuments can't be ignored or torn down. 3, and this is a really sneaky one, usurp the work of others. He would literally have the names of earlier pharaohs erased from their monuments so he could carve his own name on top. And finally, step 4, deify yourself. Make sure you're worshipped as a god for all time.
So this brings us back to our big question. Was he a great king or a master propagandist? The more you look at it, the answer seems to be, well, both. In fact, his absolute mastery of propaganda might have been the very thing that was essential to his success as a king.
And his legacy is so powerful, it has literally followed him into the modern world. In 1974, his mummy needed to be flown to Paris for some preservation work. The thing is, French law required anyone entering the country, living or dead, to have a passport. So the Egyptian government issued one for him, and under occupation, they wrote King Deceased. You just can't make this stuff up. This timeline just puts his enormous life into perspective. He's born, he becomes pharaoh, fights Kadesh, signs the world's first peace treaty, and then lives to be about 90 years old? He defined his era so completely that 9 pharaohs after him took his name, all of them just hoping some of that greatness would rub off on them.
And that leaves us with a final thought. We always hear that history is written by the winners, but Ramesses II makes you ask a slightly different question. What happens when the winner is also the best storyteller? He's living, or well, dead proof, that a great story, if you tell it loudly enough and carve it deep enough into stone, can be just as powerful as any army.